live. You're now live, Chair.
Thank you very much, and welcome to the virtual meeting of the Council Budget meeting. Just a couple of things. Today's a Random Act of Kindness Day, so what I'm expecting from you all is to be courteous and try and keep your contributions short and to the point, please. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, item 1, apologies for absence. Jennifer?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. We have apologies this evening from Councillor Jafari Marbini and Councillor Mick Haynes. And we have apologies from Councillor Arshad, unless she's very lucky and actually gets here on time. We have enough members to form a quorum. Some members are still arriving in the meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. Item 2, declarations of interest. I believe, okay, Councillor Sarge Malik, this relates to item 7.
That's correct. As a taxi driver, yes, yeah, and I will be in the officer's hand. So when the items start, they can kick me out and then let me in when the item is off the agenda.
Thank you very much. Okay. Item 3, announcements. Unfortunately, there was a sad passing of a former councillor, David Penwarden, who was a Lib Dem councillor for the Iffley ward for 2000-2002. And I believe there's 2 councillors who would like to say a few words, and that's Councillor Steve Goddard, followed by Councillor Ed Turner. So over to you, Steve.
Councillor Goddard's just joining the meeting now.
Okay.
Lord Mayor, apologies. I just logged on and it then logged me out again. But can I just check? Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Mark. So yes, Council will have heard the very sad news that after an illness, Councillor David Penwarden, Councillor for Iffley ward, between 2000 and 2002, died last week. Iffley ward, when David represented it, was actually quite similar to today's Iffley and Rose Hill. It covered an area well beyond the village of Iffley where David and Lydia Penwarden made their home for many, many years. And what I remember primarily about David from working very closely with him around about that time was that he was a gentleman in the full sense of the word. He was both one of nature's natural gentlemen, and he was also a very gentle, a very kindly human being. And one could tell this from working with him in his ward, simply from the fact that everybody in Iffley, in Rose Hill, in the areas covered by that ward, seems to know exactly who he was. If you wanted almost a model of what it should be to be a councillor, then you could hardly find anyone better than David Penwarden as a person to follow. I remember him telling me at one point the sheer number of local committees in his ward that he was a member of, most often actually chair of, and it was something ridiculous. How he ever found time to do anything other than council business is a mystery to me. But it was a role that he pulled off with aplomb, a role in which the people whom he represented held him in the greatest of affection. And even though it's, of course, nearly 2 decades since he ceased to be councillor for the area, I know that he'll be sorely missed by the people whom he represented. And I'm sure council will join me in sending our condolences, of course, to David's family, and particularly to Lydia, to his wife. Thanks very much, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Goddard. And Councillor Ed Turner.
Thanks very much, Lord Mayor. I completely agree with everything that Steve Goddard just said. Obviously, I knew David because we stood at a couple of elections against each other, and I completely recognise what was said. He was extremely well known, an absolute gent, extremely kind, and also a formidable opponent. He lived, I think, in Italy from 1980 onwards, something like that. Was extremely rooted in the village, and my goodness, there absolutely wasn't a committee which David wasn't part of. But for David, it wasn't about meetings. It was about substance and achieving things. In the village, he was instrumental in supporting the village shop, which I understand had a sticky period at the time. He was chair of Friends of Iffley Village when the glebe field was passed to Oxford Preservation Trust and preserved. He was also involved in the Oriel field at the time and preserving that. And he did that alongside having had a very distinguished business career. Not many people know, but he apparently once ran the Little Chef chain of restaurants. So we all know David something from that. I knew him as well as a member of the governing body of Rosehill Primary School. The school was very dear to his heart, as was the needs of education locally, and I think he had a particular soft spot and concern for young people in the area. So, like Steve, my thoughts are absolutely with his family, particularly with Lydia, and he'll be very much missed.
Thank you very much, Councillor Turner. I'm not expecting any announcements from any of the civic holders. So I'll go straight over to the leader for announcements, please.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I have two announcements, so I'll take the second first. Firstly, I just wanted to let people know that for the next council, I have invited Caroline Green, who at that point will be our new chief executive, to give us a presentation on the difficulties that we're still facing as a council in terms of the constraints on our workforce, both in terms of all the new tasks that they currently are still having to undertake, but also the constraints in terms of the way in which we're working. I think it's quite important that we fully understand all of the different difficulties with which our workforce are contesting. So she will give a presentation on that just at the beginning of the next council meeting, and I just wanted to flag that to people before we started. But that brings me to my second point, which is that this is actually the last meeting that Gordon will be joining us as chief executive, and I didn't want to let that important milestone pass without paying full thank you to Gordon for his time with us. I mean, I was looking through the sort of list of Gordon's achievements since he's been here, and it's incredibly impressive. Gordon's only been with us for a limited number of years, but in that time, he's done more than we could possibly have asked for in terms of helping us to continue the transformation of our council. So he's led us on our council strategy with a really clear focus on 4 objectives. There's been a huge amount of work, I think, on policy development under Gordon, and that's been really critical to helping us to be able to achieve our key aims as a council. We've moved during Gordon's time here from a period where we had a sustainability strategy through multiple different stages, and now we've got a clear and defined agenda on zero carbon, and we have the launch very recently of our city partnership to deliver zero carbon. I think one of the things that I most associate with Gordon is the work that he's led on inclusive growth in the city, and Gordon's worked really closely with the Oxford Strategic Partnership to put together a brilliant series of seminars on inclusive growth, and it was a really critical part that we played as a council, thanks to Gordon, in actually getting that whole agenda across the mindsets of lots and lots of different organisations in the city who have, and beyond, by the way. Barry Wood, the leader of Cherwell District Council, is quite a convert, which is quite extraordinary. So I think it's a really impressive piece of work. We've also reset community relations and the whole agenda in Oxford around that under Gordon. And I think that has also been a really important piece of work for the council over the last few years. But I mean, one of the most critical things has been the last year, where Gordon led the organisation through the COVID pandemic and had to transform the organisation overnight, both in terms of the ways in which we were working, but also the jobs with which we were doing, setting up the hub model, remote working, and supporting our communities and developing a financial strategy in all sorts of different ways. While Gordon was here, he oversaw the launch of Oxford Direct Services as a wholly owned company of the council, and also reset the focus and capacity of the housing company with a 10-year plan to deliver over 2,000 homes. He's led us through a strong focus on assets and development, and developed the project management function that I think we all identified was much needed in the council. Developed a long-term IT strategy, and again, I think we've all sort of seen some of the difficulties that we've had with IT because we've had too many systems, and I think that's been a really important piece of work. But I think many staff in the council will also recognise that the importance that of the work that Gordon has done in terms of developing staff from within the council, and I think it is therefore not a coincidence that Caroline is taking over from Gordon, because you know, he has been really good at developing our own talent within the council, and led some really important work as well on the workforce equality strategy, which I think we will continue to reap the benefits of. So I will finish by just saying that Gordon's work in terms of partnership with us and with many of our key stakeholders in Oxford has also been really crucial to the role that he's played for us here in the council. We've had a total reset, I think, of our relationships with a number of our key partners, and that has been very instrumental in allowing us to do some of the really important work around inclusive growth, zero carbon, and so on, that we want to be able to do as a city council, because we can't work in isolation. So those partnerships are really important to us. And we've been able, through Gordon's initiatives, to work really closely with the two universities, with the colleges, with the LEP. And of course, Gordon was around just as the Growth Board was as we were chairing the Growth Board, and just as we were beginning the torrid negotiations at times around the housing and growth deal, and sort of led us through that period with all the benefits that has brought to Oxford and Oxfordshire. And finally, along those lines, I just like to particularly mention the work that Gordon has led on around the Oxford Station, where what has seemed for many years as fairly intractable problem with trying to get all the various different partners to work together for a common good for the whole of Oxford and Oxfordshire, does finally appear to be delivering a real programme of work, and that is thanks to Gordon's tireless work in this area, and I'd just like to thank him hugely for everything he's done for us. And Gordon, I know you're not quite going yet, but this was our opportunity to say thank you to you, and it is a big thank you, and you will be missed. So a huge thank you from all of us.
Yes, thank you very much, Susan. Okay, Gordon, Chief Executive, is there anything that you'd like to say at this point?
In response to that, I haven't got any notices, but just a couple of sentences. I mean, I'm sure I'll say more in the coming weeks. I'm still working behind the scenes here, but it may feel like a short time, but certainly that long description makes it feel like a very long time. I know I came originally as a interim, but with the fixed term contract, I mean, clearly that changed the way I approached work. And, you know, quite simply, I haven't treated it as an interim role, but as a substantive role, embracing the whole of the agenda that the council wants to pursue. I mean, Susan's right that I've put a lot of time and effort into supporting both the aspirations and sights of staff to meet the high ambitions that councillors here have rightly set for the city. And I think we've made a lot of progress on that. And I believe that, you know, as now a resident in Oxford, that I will enjoy the benefits of that for years to come. So thanks very much for your kind words, Susan. I look forward to sign off conversations with a range of people, but I have enjoyed enormously working in this fabulous city and really dynamic council. So thanks very much for the opportunity.
Yes, thank you. Chief Finance Officer, any announcements?
No, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. And Monitoring Officer, Susan?
No, thank you, Lord Mayor.
Okay. That takes us on. Actually, before we get to item 4, can I just double check with Jennifer? Do we have all the councillors in now? Do we have any other more apologies?
Lord Mayor, as we start the main business, we have 39 councillors out of the total and 10 officers.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so item 4, procedure for debate of the medium-term financial strategy and budget. Just to note the procedure and timings. So we're looking to take a 30-minute break, probably between 6:30 and 7, which will be after the Green Group budget amendment. Okay. So item 5, public addresses and questions. We have no speakers. Item 6, so that's the main pack, page 17. The proposed changes to the Constitution 2020-2021, and I will hand over to Councillor Nigel Chapman to present this.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I hope everybody can hear me okay. This is our annual review of the Constitution. The aim is that it reflects our needs, the way we operate as a council, and it also reflects changes in the law. And if any of you have complex technical questions around the law, then we have our legal and governance head, Susan Sale, here in the council to answer those. As is the tradition, we look at these things in a cross-party way, and we have a cross-party group. And I'd like to thank colleagues from across the political spectrum for giving up quite a lot of time actually around Christmas to do this work. I say a lot of it is about tidying up and reflecting, you know, technically the reality of what we do. On this occasion, while we always try to get unanimity on everything, it wasn't possible in every aspect. And by a majority view, I'd like to just highlight the changes we are proposing to the planning scrutiny and planning committees in particular, where we had a vigorous debate, and no doubt I suspect this debate will be reflected in full council shortly. What we are proposing is from May 2021, we will change the planning committee structure to merge the 2 area planning committees into a single committee. We will increase the membership of that committee from 9 members to 11. And we will increase delegation to officers in order to streamline and make efficient the work, and to make sure that the committee can concentrate on the big, often sometimes contentious applications of scale and density that are absolutely right at the top of its agenda. So it does mean delegating a little bit more power to officers, and there are 3 areas where that delegation is noted in detail in the report. But what I would say though is that as now, if any member has concerns about a planning application, they can call it in alongside with 5 colleagues. They have to call it in on planning grounds, but that means that if people do have concerns, the full glare of publicity, the full light of the planning committee's intellect and focus can be brought to it. So whilst I've heard arguments about a democratic deficit in relation to this, I don't actually accept them, nor did the majority of the committee either. In addition, the Planning Review Committee continues its existence, and there are no changes to its constitution, the way it will operate. So we effectively still have many checks and balances in place if members feel that too much power is being delegated to officers, or officers are deciding things that they would like to see discussed in public. There's still plenty of scope to do that. That's the main substantive change, I would say. There are other smaller changes. We have tinkered around a little bit with the area of cross-party motions.
It's time.
And I would just highlight that particular point.
Thank you, Councillor Nigel Chapman.
Happy to take questions and hear comments now.
Well, do we have a seconder for this? Is that Councillor Susan Brown? Is that you put your hand up to second, or yes? Okay.
I'm formally seconding and reserving my right to speak.
Thank you. I'm just checking. So, any further questions, comments? Craig Simmons.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. And just to echo sort of Nigel's thanks to those who put the effort in to do the constitutional changes. I think it's a shame that it did end up being a bit of a political document, because clearly constitutions are not meant to be political, but they're meant to be sort of about the good conduct of the council. And I would hope that would have sat outside of sort of narrow party interests. But I have three specific questions, and with your agreement, Chair, I'll just ask those now. And obviously we'll be voting for this because it's gone through the proper processes. But there are some questions on page 18. It explains there, and I'm just referring to the summary parts, refers about provision for single cabinet member decisions, which I can understand why there would be necessary sometimes. My concern is that might be the thin end of the wedge for sort of return to sort of single member committees, because once you've got some delegated decisions to individuals, the tendency might be to say, well, could you just make a decision about this, that and the other? And so I'm just want reassurance that we're not going down that road, because we've tried it and it didn't work. Secondly, you mentioned, Nigel, around the cross-party motions, and it's really great to see the emergency cross-party motion facility in there. I think that's important. But as far as I can see, there's no changes to the timings of the motions to allow for cross-party motions to sit outside the 60-minute time limit window. And I know that I thought that was uncontentious. So I'm surprised that that's not in there. And the final third point is on the planning call-in provisions, which I think is on page 22, 17.4 from memory. Yeah, there's I can totally understand that we need to, I don't agree with the move to one planning committee, but there's obviously a need to manage business to that single planning committee. But I was just aware of an email that went around from Councillor Cook, in fact, this week, asking for a call-in. And I would question whether his call-in was on the basis of material planning considerations. It's more about process. And I want to make sure that we can still call in decisions where we think the process has gone wrong, rather than needing to refer to particular planning policy that we think hasn't been complied with, because I think it often is process that we're concerned about, not just about specific material planning considerations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jennifer, was your hand up just to say that the 3 minutes are up? Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Okay, Councillor Andrew Gantz.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to thank Nigel Chapman for the way he chaired the cross-party working group. He's acknowledged this is a majority and not a unanimous report, but he dealt with the discussions very professionally and courteously. We won't be supporting it because there are some substantial things in here that we didn't agree with. We don't support moving to a single area planning committee. There is a reduction in democratic oversight, but just as important is the public perception of being involved, which as elected members should be front and centre of our thinking. There also doesn't seem to be any shortage of application coming to committee. The last planning committee I subbed on lasted 3.5 hours, despite the able chairing of Councillor Cook. we're happy with planning reasons forming part of call-in. We supported the idea of a separate speaking slot for ward councillors at the planning committee. And I think just worth making the point that at the moment, speaking at committee is divided between those who oppose an application and those who support it, which in my view is too black and white. A councillor might well be asking the committee to consider a particular aspect rather than urging any particular outcome. And giving councillors a brief separate slot would allow them to do this. As far as cross-party motions is concerned, truncating the timetable is not unreasonable in itself, but like Craig, I simply can't see any reason for not taking cross-party motions outside the 60-minute time limit. And just to sort of briefly look at the reasons for that, there's definitely been an increase in cross-party motions, and this is a good thing in itself. But procedurally, adding in a cross-party motion means losing a single-party one. And this is where things look a bit different from this side of the chamber. Single-party motions are the principal opportunity for opposition and independent members to get our ideas and proposals formally tabled and debated. And not taking them out of the 60-minute slot is therefore, in practice, reducing opportunities for that kind of debate. The argument is made that cross-party motions have to be agreed by group leaders and that therefore I can simply not agree to take one as a cross-party motion. But this is not what happens in reality, speaking from experience. If I am asked if my group supports a very worthwhile motion, am I really going to be put in the position where others can say that the Lib Dems didn't support it? Of course I'm not. It simply doesn't work like that. There is also, I think, if we just take into the account the changes to the timetabling, we are looking at a situation where it is possible for a cross-party motion to be tabled after members have seen single-party motions and could, without wishing to be cynical, therefore use it to take out motion 4 or 5 if they didn't like it. And the final point, Lord Mayor, is that during all the meetings of the working group, I didn't actually hear a single good reason for not doing so. The only practical change is that we would be here for an extra 15 minutes.
Okay, Councillor Gant, thank you very much. I appreciate that. That's your 3 minutes up, and we have a couple more. We have Councillor Sarge Malik, then Colin Kirk, David Henwood, and Alex Hollingsworth, and I'm not taking any more people after that. Okay, so over to Councillor Malik, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. My only question or concern is, I mean, I am all up for trying anything which can improve, and I will support this motion, bringing it to one committee. The only question I want to ask is how long the meeting will be. Like just Councillor Gant Trafford, one of the meeting lasted 3.5 hours or more, because now currently we have 2 meeting structure where basically loads of application comes in and they are decided. So making one is fine. I don't have any problem with the numbers. 11 numbers are fine from 9 to. And I have no problem saying it's not biased because they will be party, whoever got the seats and proportion as the seats. So that will be total democratic. There's no issue at all. The only concern I have is the time scale. And would the application then wait longer, or would the meeting will last more longer? So is it more work for the officers and longer hour for the councillors, or it will be just held back, or we have a just shortcut, like we're just going to give authority to one person who will have the constitutional authority to decide. So if most of the application are decided by one person, that will be democracy in danger. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just remind councillors you don't have to use the full 3 minutes. Okay, Councillor Henwood, please. Hello. Okay, I'm going to take the next person. Councillor Hollingsworth, please.
I think Councillor Cook was the next person, wasn't he?
Oh, sorry, my apologies. Just looked at the list. Yes, Councillor Colin Kirk, off you go.
Thank you very much. I wasn't intending speaking on this. However, as I've been named, I did instigate a call-in at the request of some of my constituents. It did not meet the threshold for that call-in. It only achieved 5 councillors supporting the call-in. But rest assured, I will continue to act as an advocate for my constituents who wish to see scrutiny of a planning decision at the Planning Review Committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor David Henwood.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Sorry about that. I agree what's happening with the planning committees, and I will support that element. However, I will be voting against this motion simply because, as is a review of the Constitution, it doesn't facilitate inclusion of independent members within that committee to review the Constitution. So, unfortunately, I find that difficult to accept.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Alex Hollingsworth.
Yeah, apologies, Lord Mayor. A couple of very brief comments on what's been said. First of all, material consideration in planning terms, it's something that any planning decision has to be based on. So I think it's reasonable that a call-in should be based on material considerations. Those include policy considerations, but also planning legislation. So I think in the case of the call-in that was referred to, there was a query about whether or not proper process had been followed. That's clearly governed by planning legislation. That's a material consideration, so it's a legitimate reason for a call-in. On Councillor Gant's point about not wishing to support or oppose a planning application, and I refrain from any comment about that being a position which I'm sure Councillor Gant enjoys being in on a regular basis. The councillors, of course, are not constrained in any shape or form from putting comments forward on a planning application in exactly those terms, just like everyone else. They don't have to have a special slot to speak at the beginning of the council meeting. And the final comment on what Councillor Malik just said, of course, something like 95% of planning applications are already decided by one person. They're decided by the officers under delegated powers. The change here is pretty minor, and what it does do is not bring to committee minor amendments to planning applications which are there simply because of their size. The West Area Planning Committee had an extensive report drafted, I imagine, over a great deal of time by an officer recently in order to make a very, very minor adjustment to a large planning application, which had no speakers for or against and was approved without further discussion. And that seems to me the thing that we want to avoid. It's that kind of procedural approach that we want to change. So I think by taking those sorts of applications out, it will ease the pressure on council officers and leave the planning committees focusing in on those applications which are most important to be seen to be decided democratically by a planning committee in the proper way.
Okay, thank you very much. Through you, Councillor Chapman, I don't think you need to really sum up on this. We've points have been made.
With respect, Lord Mayor, I was asked a couple of questions and I haven't had the chance to answer them. I think I should.
Okay, that's all right. Keep it brief, please.
Yeah, I can assure Councillor Simmons this is not a thin road to, more power for single cabinet members to make decisions. That was definitely not part of the agenda. It's not part of the agenda going forward. So I'll give him that assurance. On the issue, the overall length of time for motions, this comes down then to a matter of judgment. On balance, the committee felt that 60 minutes was enough to encompass both cross-party motions and individual party motions. And I would say fine to Councillor Henwood, he can, by all means, he can join the group if he's part of a group. But at the moment, the independents are not a group. They're a series of individuals. If you were a group, Councillor Henwood, then I would definitely bear that in mind when we come to forming those who will look at the Constitution in the future. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Chapman. Okay, we're now going to go to the vote. For the blue hands, 4. And we're going to check the non-votes as well. So please give Jennifer time to count up and check names, please. So we are voting for blue hands now.
So for the recommendations as set out in the report, and when you've all put your hands up, I'll count up the numbers and then I will put everybody's hands down and let you know. So I'm seeing 28 in support. And if I put those 29 in support, and if I put those hands down.
Jennifer, can I just come in? Sorry, Catherine. I've just spotted Councillor Nigel Chapman. He hasn't got his hand up.
Well, I have. I can see my hand. Well, if you could take it that I'm voting in favour of it, that would be helpful.
Right. Bear with me a second.
It was just for clarity.
Yeah. Okay, I shall lower those hands, and if I can see those voting against. Nigel, your hand is now up, which is very odd. And I'm just going to score off, try and make sure who I've got everybody. Okay, I think that's, I have 10 voting against, and can I just check? I think that is everybody. Have I missed anyone? If you want to shout.
I was going to abstain, Jennifer.
Sorry, that was
Councillor Dick Wolf.
Councillor Dick Wolf.
I'm voting for Jennifer.
And Linda Smith for. Okay, that's carried, Lord Mayor, and I have everybody's votes.
Sorry, what were the numbers for?
That's 34, 10 against, and 1 abstention.
Thank you very much. Okay, that takes us to item 7, which the main pack is page 51. So the Licensed Gambling Acts and General Purposes Licensing Committee's recommendations on fees and charges. So I will hand over to Councillor Cook. And I do remember back in 2018 when he was Lord Mayor, the word he used when he presented this was brevity. So let's hope it follows fashion. Okay, over to you, Councillor Cook.
I move the paper, Lord Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Clarkson.
Thank you. Yes, I too move the General Purposes Licensing Committee paper. Just to outline for Council that the committee decided not to make any significant increases in fees and charges for the coming year, and that's to provide financial stability for licence holders and to support the recovery. Thank you. The one thing I would draw Council's attention to is the pavement licences, which are £100 at the moment, and this is due to government legislation which expires in September, and after that the annual fee for a street cafe licence will revert to the previous charge of £815. It would be good if the government allowed the pavement licence to continue beyond September, but we're very much in the hands of the progress on the pandemic on that. But it would be good if we could continue that further. Thank you. So yes, I'd recommend Council to support the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, again, blue hands for. And then we'll do blue hands against and abstain. And please give Jennifer time to count up and she'll take the hands down.
Okay, Lord Mayor, I have 38 hands are raised. Can I just check Councillor Linda Smith and Councillor Kennedy?
I'm voting for Jennifer. Thank you.
Linda Smith is voting for, and Pat Kennedy is voting for. So that's 4. That's 44, and that's everybody, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. Okay, so that's been carried. Okay, brings us on to item 8. So in the main pack, page 69. And this is a report of the Council's Chief Finance Officer for the robustness of the 2021-22 budget. So over to you, Nigel Kennedy.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So this is a report that I'm required to make under Section 25 of the Local Government Act 2003, which comments on the robustness of estimates and also the adequacy of reserves. And Council are required to consider this report when setting the budget. Just in terms of the robustness of estimates, so I can confirm that these estimates have been put together by officers, have been subject to quite rigorous scrutiny and challenge by senior management, by the Cabinet, by Councillor Turner in particular, and also the scrutiny panel. The estimates are obviously at a point in time, and there's still some uncertainties around some of our income streams, especially around commercial rents, and also how long some of those streams, such as car parking, will take to bounce back. Indeed, some of those areas may not bounce back to pre-COVID levels. However, based on our current information, I will conclude that the estimates are as robust as we could make, given the available information we've got. In terms of the adequacy of reserves, members will recall in Cabinet June 2020, we took a decision to balance part of the deficits arising from COVID from taking from reserves at an estimated amount of around 10 million. At the outset, the proposals that you've got before you have increased that level to 11.3 million over the 4-year period. And I've accumulated those reserves from some of the earmarked areas, things that were provisionally allocated prior to this financial year, from the business rates reserve, capital reserve, repairs and maintenance, and also from projects and carry forwards. That's not without some pain, basically. These were provisionally allocated, and if work is required to go ahead in some of those areas, then either further funding will need to be identified or additional reserves will need to be found. So it's not a painless way of dealing with this. The resultant position is shown in Table 1, and that shows that basically our reserves and working balances fall from 43 million at the start of this year to 33 million by 2022. But because some of those reserves are actually ring-fenced, the actual position is a bit worse than that. Our actual unring-fenced reserves, i.e. those that we can rely on to cover any unexpected issues that might arise in the future, actually fall to around 22 million. And that includes £3 million of the COVID emergency reserve that I'm going to need as well. So they have fallen quite dramatically over the period, and certainly forecast to do so. Members sometimes ask what is the level of reserves that we should hold. And there isn't a hard and fast rule. It depends on the individual authority, it depends on the risks that we are running, and also the sensitivity of key budget areas and income streams. And overall, it really depends on a judgment call. CITFA actually gives some guidance on resilience, but really that's at least 1 year out of date, and the current information we have doesn't really reflect what all local authorities are actually going through. There's no doubt that the financial resilience of the council has been reduced significantly due to COVID, but the use of such reserves has been a pragmatic way to manage the effects of COVID and allow the council to set the budget as we are tonight, basically, in a structured and rational manner. The reserves are forecast to be partially replenished at the end of the 24-25 MTFS period. And ideally, this replenishment should really come earlier, and members should consider perhaps seeking to top up these reserves as a first call from surpluses that may arise on the revenue account as that becomes available to strengthen our financial position when we can. Notwithstanding this, the level of reserves should prove adequate until this replenishment takes place, and also based on our current assumptions. And therefore, as I say, I can confirm they are adequate with those caveats. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Nigel. Okay, so to note the report and its setting for its budget for 2021 and the indicative budgets for 22-23 to 24-25. Okay, so no voting. Any questions or comments? Okay, that takes us, thank you very much, Nigel, appreciate that. And that takes us to the main pack, item 9, main pack, page 85, which is report of the Scrutiny Budget Review Group. And I believe Councillor Fry will present this.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. as you'll gather from what Nigel's just said, we have a special vote of thanks, I think, from the panel for Nigel, but also to Tom Hudson as the very hard-working scrutiny officer and Ed. And I must give personal thanks to the other 3 panel members, Joey Mkonge, Ros Smith, and Craig Simmons. I mean, it's the most difficult budget review I've known, and we had an awful lot of work. I mean, the good news for us as a panel is that most of our recommendations were recommended in full or to a large measure. I'm just going to highlight 3 recommendations and 1 point that came up in our discussions that we couldn't really recommend because it's outside the scope. The first thing, which I know is going to be discussed later today, is about the issue of investment in property. When we began, there was a very large, ambitious plan to invest in commercial property. That was skybushed by PWLB that took away the ability to borrow for such things. And we now can only borrow from PWLB for regeneration or for projects, for example, with environmental benefit. The panel's view was that we shouldn't confine ourselves to property, or if we confine ourselves to property, we should be doing so where the council already has an inside track, such as owning the property which needs regeneration. I think there's a danger of the grass is greener in terms of these investments. And in fact, it's ironic, yesterday I happened to be talking to someone who was a director of a property company nationally, who said that local councils are looked on as the buyer of last resort right now in terms of commercial property. So that was a concern we have. I mean, somewhat similar and related was in the budget, we're looking to generate income from subletting office space that we currently occupy or own. I think there's going to be a lot of such space available, and the panel, I think, was concerned that we shouldn't be overambitious in terms of what we hope to achieve. Another area we discussed, and I think on the whole we're glad with the response, was about the covered market, where we'd actually proposed a separate trading account, but as I understand it, it is envisaged to have separate information made available on revenues and expenditures, so that at least we have a clearer sight of what the covered market is doing. And we were keen as a panel that we should use the services of people with experience in heritage markets, of which this is clearly a very special one. Another point was about social impact bonds, which are not a big item, but we were concerned that these on, sorry, time, is it?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that, Councillor Fry. Thank you very much. And I believe Councillor Ross Smith.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, Councillor James Fry has highlighted some of the concerns and recommendations that we had from the Budget Scrutiny Review Committee, and I would concur with him that we do need to look at beyond just commercial investments. We need to look at other means. I think to put it correctly, we need to sort of quote our recommendations 8 and 9 from the Scrutiny Budget Committee report. And I would recommend those 2 to full council.
Thank you very much. And that takes us on to Councillor Craig Simmons, please.
Yes, thank you. And just like to say thank you to Councillor Fry for his excellent chairing of the Budget Review Group. It's always a pleasure to sit on a committee with him. His knowledge of finances is very welcome under these circumstances. And also to add my thanks to Tom Hudson and Nigel Kennedy for their sort of support, and it has been a challenging process. As Nigel Kennedy said, you know, the scrutiny review process is an important part of the whole sort of ensuring the robustness of the budget. So, I mean, I'm slightly surprised that, you know, only half the recommendations this year were accepted by Cabinet, and 5 were refused. And, you know, so an equal number were refused or not, you know, partially agreed than were actually accepted. And I think that's unusual. because mostly, you know, it's worked cross-party, and the comments of the review group are welcomed and incorporated. So I don't know if there's any comment Councillor Fry or anyone else wants to make on that. And then I have a specific question on, and I don't know if this is right to ask it now, but it is in the report, the response to recommendation 24, which is on page 137, which is, we asked for a breakdown of the neighbourhood SIL spending, and which we've got, and I think it's in appendix 1, and I think it's and I now have questions. Now we've got this breakdown, and it's, you know, these are meant to be neighbourhood SIL applications, but it seems very much to me that the neighbourhood SIL money is being spent on things which are not relevant to neighbourhoods. I mean, they're not worthy things. For example, funding community grants program and Citizens Assembly and Young People's Pathway contribution. But I'm just wondering where that boundary is against neighbourhood SIL, which obviously the neighbourhood forums are allowed to decide on how it's spent, and the fact that some of this neighbourhood SIL seems to be spent on citywide projects.
Thank you very much, Craig. Councillor Liz Wade, please.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I've just got a question about the response to recommendation 7, if this is the right moment for it. I'm just a bit concerned by the response which says we have appointed commercial property agents to support us in any options analysis. I'm wondering whether we should look wider for agents to provide us with advice. Commercial property agents are inevitably going to be in commercial property, but we're talking, all of us are talking, I think, about spreading the money that we've got more widely, possibly into investments in our green sustainability. I don't think a commercial property agent is the right person to advise on that. So I wonder if we could reconsider the nature of the agents whom we are now taking on board. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wade. We've got 2 people. We're not taking any more questions now. So we've got Councillor Alex Hollingsworth and then Councillor Ed Turner.
Yeah, just picking up the point about the neighbourhood SIL. The SIL breakdown that is listed under recommendation 24 is the neighbourhood SIL for those parts of the city which are not covered by parish councils or neighbourhood plans. So it's, you know, the rest, as it were, which is why funding for the community grants programme and so on seems to be quite a sensible use of neighbourhood SIL in that context. When there are schemes in the parish areas, the parish councils are responsible for those, and those will be done through their own budgets. And where there are neighbourhood forums and neighbourhood plans in existence, the city council will act as the delivery agent for those schemes, but on the recommendations put forward by those forums, which I believe we have not yet had any such proposals, though I believe they are in the offing.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hollingsworth. Councillor Ed Turner.
Thanks very much. I mean, first of all, my thanks also to Scrutiny for the very thorough and detailed report, and for the challenge. I think it's been really welcome. And I have a slightly different take to Councillor Simmons in terms of the reception of the recommendations. I mean, I think it depends on whether you look at ones which are partially agreed, where I think we say often that's where we're coming at an issue from the same angle and go a lot of the way to meeting what Scrutiny is asking for. I think they've all been welcomed. I think there are a couple of areas also where reasonable people may reasonably differ, and that's okay. And what's important is that there is some challenge and there's some debate and discussion, and people will reach their judgments as they will this afternoon. I think one point where I would disagree is that I think Scrutiny sometimes has the impression that any investments the council make in the future will in some way be confined to what here is referred to as commercial property investments, what I think now I would call more regeneration. That isn't the case. That's simply what we've done is we pared back what was previously a commercial property investment programme and kept a smaller amount of money in there for that. And in terms of Councillor Wade's point about commercial property agents, we do still have a significant commercial property portfolio. We need to see how that portfolio will evolve, existing stock, indeed any new stock that we might support, and clearly we need expert advice in that area. But council should be assured, and we'll debate this later as well, that if other good investment opportunities exist, then we will of course follow them up. And of course the budget we're about to debate includes very significant investment in housing, particularly social housing through OCHL. The other point, just to flag on the covered market, again, the feedback there was helpful, and I think there will be very shortly a briefing proposed for members on covered market. So it was, and hopefully that will be going into people's diaries soon. So hopefully that will be of interest. But thanks again to James, to the panel, and to Tom Hudson for their work on this report.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Okay, that takes us now on to item 10. So the main pack, page 139, the briefing note. We have the budget 21-22 medium-term financial strategy to 22-23 and to 24-25. Item 10, the report 10A, additional recommendations from the Cabinet and corrections. 10B will be the Liberal Democrat amendments, 10C will be the Green amendments, and after the break we'll have the individual amendments. I just want to get a bit of guidance, take us back to 10A. So corrections, I believe, in the report E, changes to fees and charges shown in Appendix 7, and H, the further 150k of revenue. Just some clarity on that, Jennifer.
Yeah, Lord Mayor, if I could remind councillors that the recommendations from Cabinet to this meeting are the ones set out in the Cabinet minutes, which are those in the report, plus essentially the addition that was mentioned earlier by Councillor Clarkson to the fees and charges, and also a minor change to recommendation H to include both a loan facility and 150k in revenue. Councillor Turner might want to elaborate on those, but those are the recommendations the Cabinet have put forward.
Okay, over to Councillor Ed Turner, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. 15 minutes, I think, for this.
Yes, that's right, yes.
Great, thank you. Cheers. Lord Mayor, colleagues, we're clearly living in very difficult times indeed. A year ago, when we were in our council chamber passing our budget, none of us would have known that 12 months on, we'd be sitting on a Zoom call doing the same thing, although of course some signs of the impending horrors of COVID were there. The government's dashboard tells us that 170 people from Oxford have died from COVID-19, part of the appalling toll of over 118,000 deaths nationally. Each person gone too soon, families and friends grieving a loss, healthcare and social care workers caring until the last. Our thoughts are with all affected by this terrible disease. It's a truly grim context. The disease has, of course, also had much wider impacts in Oxford. Businesses have been forced to close, and sadly, some have closed their doors for the last time. Workers have faced severe financial uncertainty and hardship. Children have been away from their classrooms and their friends for months on end. All of this brings, of course, profound ramifications for our council. It's a challenge in several senses. It's a financial challenge in that it rips a hole in our medium-term financial strategy. It's a challenge for our city's economy because we have to ask how we can support people to rebuild their businesses and their livelihoods. It's a social challenge as we ask ourselves how we can support people and communities affected by the disease, suffering from the hardship it causes. These are all aspects that this budget, significantly changed since last year, seeks to address. But first of all, let me turn to the challenge the disease has posed for our council's workforce. Almost overnight, we had to switch to a model of home working. Staff used to coming into the office were instead logging on remotely, often with childcare and other caring responsibilities to fulfill alongside their jobs. Teams that were used to gathering in person only saw each other over a Zoom screen. And there were major new burdens, thousands of business grants to administer, calls from distressed people falling into difficulty with rent, council tax, or indeed worried about eviction, youth workers wondering how they could support young people more vulnerable than before, but whom they were no longer allowed to meet in person. The response from our council workforce has been, quite frankly, astonishing. Grants have been processed in a timely fashion. Homeless people have been helped into independent accommodation. Support hubs were established and have assisted people with everything from emergency food to important errands to arranging friendly contact for those feeling isolated. Our bins have been collected. The wheels of the council have kept on turning, either with staff working from home or with staff going out to work, often in the most terrible conditions, in spite of the obvious increased risk it brings. We owe our staff, every single one of you, whether council employees or our fantastic team at ODS, the biggest debt of gratitude imaginable. Lord Mayor, if you're happy with it, I hope people might feel able to unmute themselves for a moment to share a little bit of virtual applause for what our workforce has done.
Yes, most definitely. Okay, do we have a seconder? Thank you very much, Councillor Turner. Do we have
Oh,
sorry, my apologies, sorry.
Yeah, you're fine, you're fine. And I think also just reflecting on something that Susan said earlier, that sort of committed leadership of our workforce starts at the top. Gordon, thank you very much indeed for all you've done as our Chief Executive throughout your tenure and especially in this very difficult past year. I also want to thank our finance team. Every year, the budget feels a bit more difficult with new googlies being bowled by central government. But this year, pulling a budget together with a £29 million hole being left by COVID, and I'll come back to that, and without the ability to meet apart from through a screen, it's been a truly heroic effort. Big thanks to Nigel Kennedy and all the finance team. And let's do it with mics off, but another round of virtual applause there, I think, would be appreciated as well. Thank you. On that note as well, let me just once again acknowledge the very positive role played by our staff trade unions. In normal circumstances, we'd have sought to negotiate a new multi-year pay deal. Because of the pandemic, we haven't done so, and instead there's to be a one-off recognition payment of £400 to staff. This arrangement will help us protect jobs as well as reward staff fairly, and our workforce can be assured that through positive dialogue with our trade union friends, we'll do what we can to protect jobs and reward the extraordinary efforts that have been made, most especially in the last year. So now let me turn to the rebuilding of Oxford and the role this budget sees the City Council playing. First of all, I think I have to set out the rather gloomy backdrop. If we roll the clock back a year, we already faced a difficult situation with uncertainty about the government's move to so-called fairer funding, a historic commercial property portfolio 80% focused on retail, the ending of the new homes bonus, and of course with government grant being a thing of the past. And then along comes COVID. The impact has been dreadful. I'd refer colleagues to Table 1 in the budget report showing some £29 million of impacts in the year just gone and over the coming 4 years. There are, of course, major hits on car park income, lettings income, with the town hall, for example, being closed, extra spend for ICT, spend on locality support hubs and in assisting homeless people. But there are also 2 other things I especially need to flag. One is the impact on the Oxford Direct Services dividend. Clearly, ODS suffers. For example, if shops are closed, there is no commercial waste to collect. Our income from ODS is part of our Oxford model, whereby rather than cutting services, we look to increase income. I still believe that's the right thing to do, but we've always been clear that compared with simply cutting jobs and services, it comes with a risk. And the truth is that this pandemic means that our council, our Labour council run with Labour values in mind, is worse affected than the Tory Shire that's cut services to the bone. And secondly, there's of course a significant and lasting impact on commercial rents. Now, we don't need to apologise for holding a commercial property portfolio. Like many councils, this was something that historically we've held, part of what nowadays might be called place shaping, but in years gone by was just considered what councils did to ensure that shops were available to meet people's needs. It's a good thing that we have the covered market. It's a good thing that we rent out shops on our housing estates. It's a good thing that we hold properties in the city centre. It's a good thing that we've received income from these sources to fund local services. But of course, many of these holdings have been very badly affected, and we've taken an appropriately understanding approach to rents when premises have been unable to trade. So you might think that the government would recognise that this was something unexpected and beyond our control, especially when it said that commercial landlords were expected to make reasonable adjustments to rent. Especially when at the start of the pandemic, Secretary of State Robert Jenrick said he would do whatever was necessary to support local government. And yet, We are getting zero compensation for our commercial property losses. And overall, we're getting around £10 million of compensation compared to £29 million of losses. We are truly being left in the lurch by this atrocious government. That's why we're having to draw on over £11 million of our limited reserves to meet the cost of the pandemic. Everything I say now about the positive things that we're doing needs to be said and seen in this context. So what is important in rebuilding Oxford and helping our city, our people recover from the pandemic? Clearly, we need action on our housing challenge, our housing crisis. This budget increases spend to tackle rough sleeping by a further £1.3 million a year to over £3 million annually. It's so important that we don't throw away the progress that's been made as we work to get everyone in. And more than that, we're now seeing the tremendous potential that can be offered by our local housing company, Oxford City Housing Limited. We're looking at £136 million of investment, bringing 620 units of social housing, genuinely affordable housing, not some sort of affordable in name only product dreamt up by the Tory Lib Dem coalition. That will make a tremendous difference, and we will do more in the future. And of course, our local housing company will also build some homes for sale. We need housing of all tenures in Oxford, and the return from that, rather than going to the shareholders of Taylor Wimpey or Barrett Homes, will go to fund our frontline services. Overall, we're seeing around £25 million coming as income from the housing company in interest payments and dividends. I just remind Council that this relies on the houses being built, and I look forward to hearing a welcome to those house building projects from colleagues, while of course helping local communities shape the developments. We also need to do everything we can to support our local economy. This budget proposes investment in the covered market, totalling over £2 million. And alongside that, we'll be working hard to support the traders in that unique and fantastic environment. We've already agreed funding for Experience Oxfordshire from government grant to allow them to assist businesses in the visitor economy. We have, in response to the government's changed rules on borrowing, proposed to pivot towards investment in regeneration, which will bring benefits to the City Council's finances, but also, and importantly, bring wider benefits to Oxford's economy. Just as, for example, the Boswells deal that was recently agreed by Cabinet will do, and as our proposed works on George Street and in Cave Street will do. And we shouldn't just look at specific projects, but all of the council's spend. A capital programme of over £480 million over the next 4 years. This will be delivered in line with our new procurement strategy, which will support employers who pay the Oxford living wage. It will support local SMEs. It will support voluntary community and social enterprises. It will give weight to social value and will support mentoring, placements and apprenticeships. Of course, we'll do what we can to support Oxford businesses directly, but putting together this budget with our procurement strategy, the Council's role will really change the game in supporting the recovery of our local economy. Oxford's communities have also suffered during the pandemic, and of course we know that COVID has hit the poorest and most marginalised communities the hardest. The budget proposes an additional £500,000 a year for each of the next 3 years above our baseline to help get our leisure centres up and running. The rebuilding of Billingdon Community Centre has already got the green light, and we propose today to confirm funding for East Oxford Community Centre as well, which will release much needed space for much needed housing, as well as a fantastic new and rebuilt facility for the community. We propose to confirm the new budget for youth work on council estates, funded by the Housing Revenue Account. Young people have had such a difficult time in this pandemic, with many facing difficulty keeping up with schoolwork, with isolation, and indeed with their mental health. Our Youth Ambition team is being fully funded throughout the coming 4 years, and I'm extremely proud that this budget provides extra funding to support our young people. And of course, individuals too face financial hardship. I'm delighted that once again we are proposing that those on the lowest incomes will not be asked to pay council tax. That's another unhappy legacy, of course, of the Tory Lib Dem coalition government. And it's important in recovering from the coronavirus crisis that we don't lose sight of the other crisis of our times, namely the climate crisis. The budget proposes some £1 million of new revenue and 17 million of new capital investment. Of course, later on the agenda, we have a report on the newly funded decarbonisation work, with over £10 million reducing emissions from our leisure centres, Hinckley Pool and the Town Hall, as well as energy storage and solar projects. Over the next 10 years of the Housing Revenue Account business plan, there's some £50 million set aside for retrofitting and regeneration, which will also bring a major climate benefit. And we look forward to the proposals that will have the maximum impact there. So, Lord Mayor, in wrapping up, all of us on this call, whether councillors, officers, or indeed interested members of the public who are watching, are here because we care about Oxford. All of us, in one way or another, will have been affected by the dreadful events of the last year. And all of us will want to do what we can to rebuild Oxford, supporting our services, our economy and our communities. This budget sets out a way forward. It's in line with our Oxford model, where we develop sources of income rather than cut services. It supports our great council workforce. It really invests in housing, in economic recovery, in tackling the climate emergency, and in supporting our communities. In spite of woefully inadequate government support, this council is truly stepping up to the plate, making a difference, and I'm proud to be a member of it and to commend the budget to you this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Councillor Turner. And do we have a seconder? Councillor Susan Brown, do you reserve the right to speak?
Yes, formally seconding at this point, reserve the right to speak.
Okay. And that takes us on to the Liberal Democrat budget amendments and the proposer, Ros Smith.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Good afternoon, everyone.
Sorry, just to remind you, as you're well aware, just maximum 10 minutes.
Yes, Lord Mayor, thank you. I am aware of the time and I have timed the speech and I hope to be just under the 10 minutes.
Thank you.
I'm sure you'll signal when I'm 30 seconds off. Thank you. It is indeed, actually, as you opened this evening's meeting, today is Random Acts of Kindness Day. And I hope that we've all managed to do at least one random act of kindness today in these very challenging days. I would first like to pay tribute to Nigel Kennedy and the Council's finance team and thank them for their time in explaining budget lines and for listening to Liberal Democrat opposition groups' suggestions. Thanks particularly to Nigel Kennedy for his good humour and for his review of our submitted budget proposals, which confirm that the alternatives proposed are arithmetically correct. The Liberal Democrat City Councillors are committed to working for the success of our unique cosmopolitan city, for the benefit of its UK and EU residents, its universities, its industry and commerce, research establishments, but in particular for the marginalised and overlooked members of our community. And I would concur with a lot of what Councillor Ed Turner has said this evening. I don't think we have a lot of differences there at all. Lord Mayor, what a year we have experienced. A global pandemic, increased threats to the earth with the continued climate change, the Tory-led Brexit delays, muddled responses from government to the pandemic. National government did indeed promise it would support local government through this pandemic. Indeed, there have been some welcome grants, particularly for help with the most vulnerable and homeless, and we must pay tribute to the city teams involved with helping getting everyone off the streets. Lord Mayor, no one at the last budget meeting held in our council chamber could have predicted that we would see this once-in-a-generation pandemic. The pandemic has touched us all, young, middle-aged and old. It has changed how we hold our council meetings and briefings. We've witnessed the changes that councils have made in response to COVID-19. Many council staff have been furloughed. The majority are now working from home and our own town hall remains closed, as does the St Aldate's Chambers, which remains mostly empty. The closure of the town hall has seen the council's income reduced and the car park income too, which were mostly empty during much of the last year. We thank all our City Council staff for their hard work during these challenging days, some changing job roles to help run the hubs, others bravely continuing in their essential public-facing roles. Some of us, Lord Mayor, have lost loved ones and have witnessed the long-term effects of COVID-19 on friends and family. We have missed birthdays, anniversaries, and many of our traditional Oxford celebrations in which our Lord Mayors would have been the lead. Thanks must also go to all our NHS staff for their dedication and hard work, which has been applauded. But wouldn't it have been better if this government had recognised their work by making sure all paid better? The vaccine rollout is to be welcomed, and I'm sure we all look forward to the end of lockdowns or lock-ins. The Tory Brexit that promised so much has left a very nasty taste for us in Oxford, I think, and we are yet to see the Brexit benefits. In our cosmopolitan city, some of our EU still feel marginalised. Our youngsons not able to take part in the Erasmus scheme or easily take a year out working in one of our European twin cities. And we still don't know the effect of Brexit long term on our universities, research centres, and indeed commerce. But not all is unknown. What we do know is that COVID-19 has devastated the retail industry, with many national retailers never to open their doors again. This will mean major changes on our high streets and within the shopping areas of Oxford, as many more people move to online shopping. And the leisure industry has suffered too. The ice rink, gyms and swimming pools closed. Opening them will be indeed costly, as has been referred to by Councillor Turner. The expected income from Fusion has gone. Instead, actually, we're going to see a huge financial increase in support from this council, around £500,000 a year, I believe. This is in addition to the government support that the company also received. Lord Mayor, council tax is a regressive tax, but until national government changes to a fairer system, we must work with it. I believe financially we're now in a period of shark-infested, uncharted waters. We would like to see a full review of the city's budgets in around early September. A pause to examine our ongoing non-statutory costs, looking at opportunities for investments and savings that would not affect our city's important, vital frontline services. Last year, Lord Mayor, we raised concerns about the significant increase in borrowing to fund a large commercial and capital investments. Indeed, the administration's budget consultation in December included borrowing even more this year, 50 million plus, for even more commercial property investments, including office space, but without a business case. As part of the Finance Scrutiny Panel, we were pleased to see this reduced, but still no business case has been made or shown for these properties and commercial investments. Our amendments propose that the first collection of bulky waste remains free to our residents. Where councils have introduced charges, fly tipping was seen to increase, with continual rising costs for clear-up. Fly tipping is not something we would want to see increase in our beautiful city and suburbs. The collection fee is another regressive tax and impacts mostly on those least able to afford it. We propose cancelling the charge with the first collection. The pandemic has meant the loss of tourist income for the city, and it will be a while before we see our overseas tourists back in Oxford City. Oxford's tourism industry has suffered drastically. We need to encourage the Stay Nation tourists. Stay Nation tourists is what Oxford needs. We see Experience Oxford as part of that drive to encourage visits to Oxford and have included the reinstatement of their grant in our amendments. We've also proposed engaging an additional planning enforcement officer. We feel this is an important role. Indeed, many smaller councils have a much higher number of planning enforcement officers. We see this role as justified, given some of the ongoing problems. For instance, or for example, the blight of 29 Old High Street in central Headington, the boarded up graffitied Crown and Thistle pub in Old Road, Headington. And given the changes that we've seen from central government in planning law, which seem to allow extensions and changes without full planning applications, an additional planning enforcement officer post is to be welcomed. In conclusion, Lord Mayor, our amendments take into account the concerns raised by the Budget Review Group, which have been ably pronounced by Councillor James Frowe this evening and by Councillor Craig Simmons. It's a group which I serve on, and I particularly point out to you our revised recommendations in 7, 8 and 9, which represent the Rebel Democrat response to the various challenges posed by Brexit, COVID and climate change. There is no vaccine for climate change. We need to make changes now and invest in a green economy. Thank you, Lord Mayor. I recommend the amendments to the Council.
Thank you very much, Councillor Smith. Do we have a seconder? Sorry, we do. Councillor Liz Wade.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to speak now, I think. Okay.
Okay, the floor is all yours.
Thank you. I would like to add my thanks to Nigel Kennedy and Stephen Clark, who've given their time and expertise very generously, and also this year to the Budget Review Group, Councillors Simmons, Ross Smith and Mukongi, led by Councillor Fry, for their powerful recommendations. I think it's made all the difference to the security going forward. Previously, capital spends were funded mainly from capital receipts, but in today's climate, that's not going to be enough. So we have to look above all to prudential borrowing. The code is set out in the capital management strategy. Is it prudent? Is it affordable? Will it be sustainable? The risks are high, and while we should not be afraid to fail, every project has to be measured against a full business case. We're looking at a deficit of 29 million over the MTFP. So on sailings, we would remove Standingford House in Cave Street. The business case to progress it doesn't exist at present, and it appears the main reason for going forward with it now is the concern about losing LEP funding. But the LEP is only 1.1 million. We have to find 5.4 million, financed and borrowing at a time when our commercial rents are down to 7.9 million, from the 12.5 million we would have expected in normal times. And that is for a project for office space, when the appetite for offices, even cheap co-working space, is difficult to evidence. Indeed, it may make more sense to use the site for new council housing. Then East Oxford Community Centre. We pause this with great reluctance. It is a multi-million-pound investment. There is an argument for pausing at least until the mid-term budget, which we are asking for in the summer. Can the current budget deliver to the scale of the original 2016 ambitions? We have to face that we're in a new financial reality here. In contrast, we want to proceed as fast as possible with Bullingdon Community Centre, where the case for replacing a badly deteriorating property was made out, and the plans were well advanced. And we would have a new centre there if the pandemic hadn't brought it to a halt. In terms of spend, we consider property regeneration as an excellent use of capital, but we are more cautious than the administration, and also very concerned to see a good rate of interest on capital investment. We therefore propose to invest 15 million in green renewables over the 4 years of the MTFP, and we anticipate a rate of 3%. We've seen higher estimates for interest from West Berkshire and Cambridgeshire County Councils, but we will take a more cautious approach. We will create our own renewable energy on our own council sites, taking advice from other successful companies like Solar Century or Low Carbon Hub with its Ray Valley solar project. We have two other projects. The first is to put 7.5 million over 4 years into regeneration of unused and empty council property. We have over 2,000 households on our housing register. They should not have to wait while we put money into office blocks for which there may be no call. Our final project is to provide 2.5 million support for a pilot project to retrofit a small number of council properties. If this works, it will provide evidence to support an application for a 50% grant from the government's decarbonisation fund. So
Councillor Wade, Councillor Wade.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Your 3 minutes are up. Sorry to
That's fine.
stop you halfway through, but your time's up.
I'm finished.
Okay, I see a couple of hands here. I'm going to take Craig Simmons first, just because we agreed it in the pre-meet. So I'm going to listen to Craig. We have Craig, Councillor Brown, Tidwell and Chapman, and then I'm going to leave it at that. Okay, over to you, Craig.
Well, thank you very much. I'll try and be brief. And indeed, there's much to commend the Lib Dem budget amendment, and there's probably no coincidence. It's many of the same elements that the Greens have in their budget. We went to many of the same briefings and looked at the same papers. In particular, I don't think any of Lib Dems have mentioned the sort of additional surplus which has been created by that budget, in terms of the amount proposed to raise is more than that's proposed to spend, so that creates a useful surplus and a financial cushion important at this time. Obviously there's a solar investment, car parking increases, which I think are important if we're really serious about building back better, and obviously the cancelling of the speculative property investment. There's some things that are concerning to us. You know, there's delays in East Oxford Community Centre. That's, you know, valuable, affordable social housing there. But having said that, if you look at the papers, it's only delaying it till September, and I'm on that reference group, and I doubt whether it would have happened by then anyway. So I think that's a very little practical effect. I don't support 4-year elections. I don't think those are very democratic, or indeed it might come as a surprise, or the reduction in cabinet posts. I think it's important at this time that we keep the numbers, and the spending priorities in the budget are certainly not, as you can see from our budget amendment, we don't share the same spending priorities. So the question we're asking ourselves is, will the administration or the cabinet approved budget be better if this amendment was passed? And I think we've narrowly come down on the side of yes, it would be improved because of the cancelling of the property investment, and also the increase in commitment to renewables, and indeed the generation of the surplus. So we'll be supporting narrowly, but I think we'll be supporting.
Okay, thank you very much. We have Councillor Tanner now. I just realised there's a few more hands up. Just for clarity, I think we've got about 18 minutes left. So if you can keep it under 3 minutes, we can have more people talking. Okay, Councillor John Tanner, over to you, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think the Liberal Democrats need to understand that this is a budget. It is not the detailed decisions about spending the money. But if the money's not in the budget, you can't spend it whether you have a good business case or a bad business case. And that's what we've got the cabinet for. And that's why we don't need a review of the budget, because the cabinet will be reviewing it not after a few months, but every month. They will be looking at the budget and how it's being spent. But I certainly can't support this Liberal Democrat budget. Not only does it half the number of elections, but it also puts parking charges up by 5%. After all the economic shocks that this city is facing, the Lib Dems, I mean, the Green Party are even worse, but, you know, the Lib Dems want to put up the parking charges by 5%. And I think we should take away the smokescreen. The Lib Dems want to scrap the East Oxford Community Centre and its associated investment with new housing. And for that reason, if none other, I don't think we can possibly support this budget. Whereas the Labour budget has plenty of investment already for homes, for a green future, and for regeneration. So this extra money that the Lib Dems want to put in, I think, is entirely inappropriate.
Thank you very much, Councillor Tanner. And now we have Councillor Marie Tidwell, please.
Thank you. Over the last year, our communities have been hit hard by the pandemic. When our city first faced the coronavirus crisis in early March, doing nothing was not an option for us. Establishing our 5 locality response hubs across the city was a 9-month project completed in 15 days. Our city and our council can be rightly proud of the speed of which we acted and the work that has been done in the last year. I'm also proud of the ambition to nurture our communities and provide support for the most vulnerable in Oxford in our Labour group budget. We retain full council tax relief for those on the lowest incomes, one of the very few councils in England to do this. We are preserving the City Council's grants pot, which is of great benefit in a range of areas, including welfare benefits advice and tackling social isolation. We'll be continuing to provide provision through our youth ambition programme to support local young people, while increasing levels of support for such provision on council estates. There'll also be significant investment in community centres, including new builds at Bullingdon and East Oxford. And all this despite 10 years of austerity. All this after losing our City Council's government grant, which the Liberal Democrats in government were complicit in culling in the early 2010s. And all all this after COVID has cost our council £29 million. And what do the Lib Dems propose in their opposition council budget today to rebuild and support our communities at this time of national crisis? They want to pause work on East Oxford Community Centre for a year, a centre which has been one of the essential locality response hubs during the coronavirus crisis, which has been a space to coordinate emergency food deliveries and volunteer coordination for vaccinations at neighbouring GP surgeries. The Lib Dems have included a saving of this pause, but nothing for the likely increase in cost of such a delay, and no consideration on the impact of delaying the new housing so desperately needed, but also on the impact to the communities that centre serves. They seem to have something against East Oxford, given the proposals to stop work on the business units at Cave Street too. In their proposal, there is no vision, no clear savings, and it makes no sense, which is why we want to move forward and invest in East Oxford Community Centre's redevelopment, as we know that it will be a hugely important part of the recovery from this pandemic for the communities it serves. I urge you to oppose the Lib Dem budget.
Thank you very much, Councillor Tidwell, and over to Councillor Susan Brown, please.
Thank you. I think following on quite nicely from where Marie finished off, because I think the thing that disappoints me most about this Lib Dem amendment to the budget is the lack of vision and faith in our city. And it is so important at the moment. We know how our city has suffered economically as well as in health terms because of the pandemic. And that's one of the reasons why we have got investment in our city as a crucial part of our budget. And this is taking out a lot of the crucial investment that we would want to see, supporting local people, supporting small businesses, supporting the economic recovery. And it is nonsense to suggest that there is actually not still a desire for business space in the city. There's every evidence to suggest that there is. There was such a shortage of space beforehand that we know that there is still a really thriving market for small business space and a real need for startup space in particular in our city. So to be taking that out is really strangling our local economy just at the point where it needs our support. So I think that's really disappointing. The other thing I just wanted to focus on is the idea of having the undemocratic proposal of moving to 4-year elections. I can understand why the Liberal Democrats might not wish to put their budgets before the electorate more regularly, but on our side of the virtual chamber, as we are in today, we are very happy to regularly put our programme of our manifesto and our budget proposals to the local electorate, and I think it's important that we do that. It's important to keep regularly in touch with people, to engage with our local populations, to keep those discussions going, and to support our local economy and have belief in our city. And we have that, and I'm really disappointed to see this very poor effort from the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown, and over to Councillor Nigel Chapman, please.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to the proposal on bulky waste and make 3 points about it. First of all, the Liberal Democrats have not acknowledged that in the budget there are concessionary rates for those who are on benefits in relation to bulky waste of 50%. So those who are the poorest in the city will not pay the full amount of money. Secondly, that it will help ODS build a dividend, because at the moment ODS is having to absorb these costs. As we can see from the budget, these costs are in the area of over £200,000 a year, which is a significant amount of money. And thirdly, I think it's quite ironic to get a lecture from the Liberal Democrats about this. When I do my researches across the country and look at the way Liberal Democrat councils behave when they're in power and actually have to make decisions, the roll call of Liberal Democrat councils who charge for bulky waste is an extremely long one. South Oxfordshire, the Vale of White Horse, Cheltenham, Cotswold, Mole Valley, Maidstone, Somerset and Taunton, North Devon. I rest my case. When Liberal Democrats are in power, they don't have any problem with this. And moreover, they use private contractors like Briffa to do it, where all the profits go back into the shareholders rather into the public services. The case is pretty clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Nigel Chapman. And we have Councillor Tom Hayes, please.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. It's interesting to hear Nigel recount the number of councils run by the Lib Dems. I was surprised there were that many. And I'm looking forward after May to hearing that there are many fewer. I think my question that I put to Lib Dems is, as a city councillor to St Clements and as a resident of St Clements, what do you have against St Clements? What do you have against East Oxford? You want to cancel work on K Street, chuck away £1 million in funding from the LEP, and it means that the building will be unlettable to new lettings as it would not meet environmental standards. You want to pause work on East Oxford Community Centre. I think we all know what that word is, masquerading. You want to cut the work. You don't want to invest in the communities, the community groups, the citizens, the diverse communities in East Oxford. And you don't want to match their dedication in responding to the pandemic by actually providing the East Oxford Community Centre that they want and we know we can deliver. I was born in and raised in council housing, and you're now saying that you don't want to have further council housing and affordable housing coming to East Oxford when it desperately needs it. And I'm not surprised by the Lib Dems saying this, but I am slightly surprised that Craig just said that the Green Party would want to associate through their votes with this attack on East Oxford. And I would really hope that he would rethink that. And then you want to increase off-street parking. This just feels entirely at odds with anything we've ever heard from Headington Lib Dems. If you do a Google search of Headington, Lib Dems, Oxford Mail, there are streams of Oxford Mail articles. And I'm looking forward to seeing the next one written about their views on off-street parking tomorrow. And then finally, you want to spend more money on solar panels. Great, but come forward with actual substantial plans. When the council is hard hit, like it is, and local government is going through the toughest times it will know, the Lib Dems have a responsibility to the city to come up with a balanced budget and prudent estimates of how they would spend funding. And lastly, because I see Mark wanting to wrap me up, the Lib Dems say that there's a climate emergency and they want to see action, but where is it? You say you care about the city, but you attack East Oxford.
Okay.
Finally, the electorate want to hear real ideas and real
Thank you very
vision,
much,
and they
Councillor
get
Hayes.
neither from the Lib
Okay,
Dems.
we have two other speakers, Councillor Hollingsworth and Councillor Mary Clarkson. You've probably got just over a minute each because I need to go back to Councillor Turner and Councillor Smith, who have their 3 minutes each. Okay, over to you.
I think you called me. I will use 45 seconds. I find it quite odd in these proposals that in advocating them, the mover drew attention to empty properties, a well-known one in Old Headington that I think we'd all like to see returned to useful use and taken away from its current dilapidated state. And then you propose to cut the planning lawyers, which are the biggest obstacle on the route to achieving that. I think I completely understand and support your objective. It's just your proposal for going about it will achieve the precise opposite of what you intend. So I hope that after this budget has fallen, you will be supporting the additional planning lawyer, and with luck, that will achieve the ends that you are after.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hollingsworth. And the last speaker, Councillor Mary Clarkson, please. You've got, again, probably about a minute.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, I'd just really like to remind the Liberal Democrats that we have been working very closely with Experience Oxfordshire and done a lot on supporting tourism. We have given grants of £50,000 specifically to Experience Oxfordshire in terms of supporting those businesses who have been most badly hit by the pandemic. We've also got in our budget, as you should have seen, £20,000 towards a long-term feasibility study to solve the long-term problem of coach parking, which is much needed. We also gave £5,000 earlier this year to the campaign for England Originals, which was to support historic cities and to encourage more tourism. We've been working on the Boswell's Hotel, and it should be clear that we have a very clear vision, not just a woolly vision, a clear vision to increase long-term tourism in this city and to support businesses. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Clarkson. Okay, we now have Councillor Ed Turner to respond. Up to 3 minutes, please, Ed, if you wish.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. There have been some good contributions in the debate, so I'll not repeat those. But I do want to express a number of other reservations about this amendment. One is, in addition to the other reasons for not delaying East Oxford, I noticed the expectation is after the delay it'll be put back in. Obviously, it'd be better if it was put back in and deleted, but it's put back in with the same budget. But if you delay a capital scheme, particularly at the moment, particularly actually with some of the Brexit issues that Councillor Smith referred to in her opening speech, then the costs will have gone up. So presumably what we will do is either we'll knock it on the head or we'll delay it, and then we'll end up having to pare back the scheme because the funds wouldn't be sufficient. That's the first thing. Secondly, I find it quite strange that we're being lectured about the lack of a business case for Standingford House. Clearly, a business case is being worked up. We're engaging with our tenants, but we really need to do something there because otherwise the building becomes unlettable, a building which is a really important part of our local economy. But at the same time, we have millions of pounds of investment proposed in conversions of apparently empty buildings with not a business case in sight, and indeed £3 million of capital expenditure next year where there is no scheme. So the party that's been talking to us about the need to deliver on our capital programme in a timely fashion has suddenly come out with this at the last minute, a scheme which really doesn't exist. Then the last point I'd like to make, Lord Mayor, is around the solar investments. You know, I would love to invest and support the council investing in solar. At the moment, the scheme does not exist. You've got in front of you our Chief Finance Officer's words saying it is difficult to assess, in effect, a scheme which doesn't exist. I'm afraid simply saying this is what we'd like to do, this is how we'd like to spend millions of pounds of public money, no information, no detail. These are the returns we think we could get on these properties, on these investments that we can't identify. That's no way to run a railway, Lord Mayor. I think we should reject this amendment.
Thank you very much, Councillor Turner. We now have Councillor Ross-Smith to sum up.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you to all that spoke. I have listened very carefully to all that you've said. As I said in my opening remarks, we do agree with a lot of what Councillor Ed Turner has said in his opening remarks to the Labour budget. Thank you, Councillor Marie Tidwell, for a lengthy speech about the Labour budget and then a couple of sentences about our budget proposals. Cave Street. Yes, we are concerned about Cave Street. This is within the city boundary, and we think that perhaps it could be looked at as regeneration for homes, in fact, actually, Councillor Tom Hayes. Homes within the area of the city, close to a good bus route and so forth, and close to employment sites. So we think that is worth looking at, regeneration of that, possibly for homes as such, rather than for more office space. Office space was mentioned, startup space was mentioned, I believe, by somebody as well. Well, locally here, we do have startup space. In fact, actually, one of the organisations that has a vast amount of startup space, which has not been filled, sadly, just yet, and looks likely to be empty for some time, in fact, actually. And I think that's, you know, something that you do need to be aware of as such. The other thing that I'd like to mention, actually, that several people have mentioned, is pausing on the East Oxford Community Centre. I'm sure many of you have had conversations and emails and things with the African community as well. We're very keen to see something there for them too. We're suggesting pausing the budget and having a good close look at it. I think Councillor Turner mentioned that the Cabinet look at it every month. Yes, that's true. But what we were proposing was a roots and branch review of it. So not just the monthly review that Cabinet undertakes, and that's a good thing, we think, absolutely, to monitor expenditure and income, but actually look right back to what we need to do as statutory commitments that a council has to do, and those then looking on the add-ons. Thank you. And then the add-ons that we have to do. And finally, just to say to council, there is an agenda item, in fact, actually later today, about investing in solar panels. I believe it's agenda item 16, at paragraphs 3E and 20, proposes investing exactly that, a major capital investment in a large portion of a local solar farm, promising that it will provide value for money for council and the public purse. So I do hope that you will be supporting that when we come to agenda item 16. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, now we come to the vote. So all together. So I usually say blue hands, but I realise some people, there are different versions of Zoom have got yellow hands, or so I'm just saying virtual hands. So what we're going to be doing is to be voting for.
Lord Mayor,
Yes.
may I suggest, can I request a named vote on this, please? I think it's right the people of Oxford get a clear indication of all the councillors that vote against money for the East Oxford Community Centre.
Yes. Yes.
Can I make it clear we're not voting against the East Oxford Community Centre? We're just pausing it.
Please remember what I said before the meeting started. Please, let's be courteous to each other. Okay, on both sides. Okay, thank you very much, Jennifer.
Lord Mayor, can I just check the rules for a named vote? That would be okay.
Through the Constitution, yes,
Right.
please.
Named vote, any 10 councillors present at the meeting can ask for the minutes to name who voted for, who voted against, and who abstained on a vote. So Councillor Smith would need 10 people in support. You may want to ask the meeting.
Okay, may I see, we have the 10 hands, more than 10 hands. So through you, Jennifer, that's agreed. And we're going to go into a name vote. And may I ask everybody to lower their hands now, please?
Lord Mayor, Council, it will be done essentially as a same way as a recorded vote. I'll call out names, and if you can say whether you're voting.
Sorry, Jennifer, can I just come in for a second? I asked for a named vote during a previous motion, and I was declined because voting had already started. We had already started voting tonight. The hands had already gone up when there was the request for named voting. So I object.
Councillor Gardens, can I just interject? And Jennifer, I want you to just double check. And Susan, I don't believe the voting had quite started. I was just going through it, but it hadn't started. So just for clarity, Jennifer, is that right?
There were hands up.
I appreciate that because
Yeah, to
some people do
request
put
the
their
name
hands up.
vote.
Yeah, to request the name vote.
No, before the named vote was mentioned.
Lord Mayor, I think the monitoring officer would like a word.
Yes, please.
Lord Mayor, I don't recall that you had asked people to cast their vote and to raise their hand, indicating whether they were for or not.
Thank you very much. We have some clarity there. Okay, over to you, Jennifer, and let's go back to the name vote, please.
Right. Apologies, Lord Mayor. When I call names, if you can unmute and say which way you're voting for the Lib Dem amendments. Councillor Altaf Khan.
For.
Councillor Azad.
Against.
Councillor Aziz.
Against.
Councillor Billy Summers.
Against.
Councillor Brown.
Against.
Councillor Chapman.
Against.
Councillor Clarkson.
Against.
Councillor Cook.
Against.
Councillor Cornes.
Against.
Councillor Curran.
Against.
Councillor Fry.
Against.
Councillor Gant.
For.
Councillor Garden.
For.
Councillor Goddard.
For.
Councillor Gotch.
For.
Councillor Hayes. Councillor Hayes.
Hayes. Hayes or Hayes?
Hayes, Tom Hayes.
Against.
Councillor Henwood.
Against.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Against.
Councillor Howlett.
Against.
Councillor Humberstone.
Against.
Councillor Ellie Williamson has left. Councillor Kennedy.
Respect.
I'll come back. Councillor Landell Mills.
For.
Councillor Lloyd-Begson.
Against.
Councillor Ligo.
Against.
Councillor McManus.
Against.
Councillor Malik.
Against.
Councillor Munkongi.
Against.
Councillor Pressel.
Against.
Councillor Rowley.
Against.
Councillor Sim.
Against.
Councillor Simmons.
Abstain.
Councillor Linda Smith.
Against.
Councillor Ross Smith.
For.
Councillor Tanner.
Against.
Councillor Tarver.
Against.
Councillor Taylor.
Against.
Councillor Tidwell.
Against.
Councillor Turner.
Against.
Councillor Upton.
Against.
Councillor Wade.
For.
And Councillor Wolfe.
Abstain.
Lord Mayor.
Sorry, yes, Andrew.
Lord Mayor, may I make a point of order?
Yes, you may.
This meeting is recorded, of course. If the record shows
Yes.
that you have in fact begun voting, will this named vote not therefore be recorded?
We've just had a response from the monitoring officer. I don't want anybody else to comment, please. I should do this. We've had a comment from the monitoring officer, and it was agreed that wasn't the case. So thank you very much, Councillor Gant, for raising this, but no. Okay, over to you, Jennifer. Take your time, and if we could just have the numbers for, against, and abstain, please.
Okay, that's 6 in favour, 2 abstentions. And 30.
Lord Mayor, sorry, I just wasn't sure whether people would have seen Councillor Lubna Arshad had registered an against in the chat of the meeting. So I don't think you called her, Jennifer.
You're correct. I did not, because I didn't.
Thank you, Susan.
There. And Councillor Kennedy.
Against.
Against. Right. So that's 6 for, 2 abstentions, 32 against.
Thank you very much. So that budget amendment falls. Okay, we're now on to the Green Budget Amendment, and just to let you know that we have 33 minutes for this, and then we'll be taking a break after the vote. So the proposer, Craig Simmons, please.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. And maybe I'll start by sort of adding my thanks to the finance team for their hard work. In fact, all officers and staff deserve our thanks for their exceptional service over the last year. I mean, this has been, as people have said, an exceptionally difficult time. We've seen our NHS and voluntary sector step up magnificently to the challenge, and our public sector has shown that they're able to adapt and continue to deliver first-rate services. And for Lord Mayor, for most of last year, I had the pleasure of meeting many of those engaged in service delivery, and saw for myself just the exceptional level of service and dedication from our own council staff and from the many volunteers that have stepped forward, more than 5,000, to help in these difficult times. And if there's ever any doubt of the need for a healthy public sector, last year should have dispelled any such doubts. But on a more sadder note, that you know, our thoughts are very much with those in the city who've lost loved ones, and of those who have lost their jobs and means to support themselves and their families. My first thought when reflecting back on the year and was that the Greens should give the administration a sort of free pass, you know, and had the recommendations of the budget review group been accepted in their entirety, there would have been a strong case for doing so. There is much to commend the cabinet approved budget. We agree with most of the revenue expenditure, most of the HRA, and a large portion of the capital. But on reflection, there are just too many cuts which, after looking at the finances, we just don't think needed to be made. Important things that we just don't think need to be changed. And that is before even considering the short-sighted decision to speculate on commercial property rather than green infrastructure, but rather, as in previous years, the Greens are not to sort of massively change the underlying budget. It's not really our role to do that. That's something that the council puts out to consultation and decides as a whole. Sure, the cabinet approves it, but it really is a budget of this council. But we wanted to build on it. And in the revenue budget, what we've done is produced not just a sort of balanced revenue budget, but one that produces a significant additional financial cushion of almost £2 million over and above what's in the cabinet approved budget. And we think that's really critical going forward with so many uncertainties and a healthy contingency, which indeed the Section 151 officer mentioned, because there will be delivery challenges, maybe in some of our budget measures, but also in some of the measures in the base budget. And to raise money, we've reintroduced from year 2, just inflation increases in car parking charges and an uplift in park and ride. And it's not just a means of raising cash or building back better. We've also assumed a deterrent effect, that fewer people will be using private cars as a result. We've also cut a small amount from special responsibility allowances. Not a lot, but we think it's important that councillors share the pain. There's also additional income linked to the changes made in the capital budget, what I'll get to. With this money we have saved and raised, we've proposed reversing those of the administration's budget cuts, not that many of them, but some, and you'll recognise some of them from the budget review group recommendations. We propose to reverse the cut to the community grant fund, reverse the cut to the Oxford living wage, staffing and publicity budget, retain the 2 planning committees, reintroduce a concessionary rate on garden waste, fully fund the follow-up work to the Citizens' Assembly, and reverse the cut to the Blue Bin Recycling League awards to good causes. We put an additional 300,000 into the depleted homelessness reserve fund. That's taking quite a punishing, and think it will continue to do so in the future. And we've also put some additional money into the sort of net zero carbon planning, as the scrutiny recommendations were to make sure that the management reporting and target setting comply with best practice. And we wanted to put in some additional resource to make sure that happened. Housing revenue account, as in previous years, we've looked at how we can build new social housing to proper zero carbon standards. According to OCHL, that cost an average of just £7,750 per home. And over 20 years, we've made this cost neutral by a modest comfort charge. And that's a model now being trialled by many councils, such as Nottingham, based on a well-proven Dutch Energy Sprong model. Now, turning to the capital budget. Rather than speculatively investing in commercial property, for which business case isn't clear, we were told in budget review group that the business case was based on one property, which was one we might not even buy, but as an illustrative example. We propose that council join the growing ranks of local authorities developing new solar farms. This meets our policy objectives and provides a modern but secure return, even net of borrowing. We propose a massive 51 million, which was the amount we originally proposed to invest in commercial property. So we know it's affordable to borrow that amount as long as we get the returns. And that would fund about 70 megawatt installed capacity and keep us on track to deliver the additional 110 megawatt local solar generating capacity that the experts say we need. The report commission for the Citizens' Assembly said that's what we need in the city by 2025. And we're not under any illusion this will be easy. Of course, not massive acceleration of anything we've considered so far, but to give some reassurance, other councils are or have delivered similar schemes of a similar size. So we've allowed 18 months to get the business cases and schemes up and running. So not like the Lib Dem budget, we've actually put in a time lag. But the reality is if we don't commit to it now, it simply won't happen within those timescales. And before concluding, I'd like to make some comments in administration's response to the climate emergency and broader sustainability agenda. It's only now an emergency, of course, because of inaction of previous council administrations. The Greens have been on this council for many years, been saying pretty much the same thing, a bit like a stuck record about the need to address the impending climate and ecological crisis. For example, one of the first things I did when elected was to push to ensure the council had a carbon management plan. And that's obviously the basis on which we're moving forward with our net zero strategy, which is great. And now I feel things are finally beginning to happen, but progress is painfully slow, although it sometimes seems that for every 2 steps forward, there is a step back. But what I think the administration maybe does not appreciate, maybe are being unfair, but because all those years, the history of inaction, we now have to move more quickly in a more focused way and unprecedented rate. So really, on that basis, I really commend a Green Budget amendment to you, and rest assured it is mostly recycled. We have been saying the same thing for more than 2 decades. And my random act of kindness is to thank all councillors, because despite of our political difference, I know that we all want to do the best for the city at this difficult time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Craig Simmons. We have a seconder, Dick Wolf.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, I'll speak briefly if I may.
You certainly can.
Refer to the Council's capital strategy. This is coming up under item 14 below. That strategy reads, the Council prioritises capital investment based on a number of different factors. And first on the list comes its contribution to corporate priorities. The Council already owns 200 odd commercial properties. We're heavily exposed in that asset class, I'd have thought. Owning commercial property is not one of our strategic priorities. We only have 5 of those, and one of them, unsurprisingly, is to follow the public's demand to take a lead in reducing carbon emissions. In paragraph 6 of our capital strategy, that priority is spelt out. Every week that goes by, the challenge of meeting our emission targets becomes tougher and tougher. It will be many, many years before we can render our existing council housing stock net zero carbon. And therefore, for the foreseeable future, we will need to offset those emissions. And procuring renewable energy generation is a great way of doing that, whilst at the same time making a financial return. As we've learnt with the pandemic, the harder you hit the problem and the sooner, the more pain and misery will be avoided later. Yet here we are proposing to borrow millions to invest in yet more as yet unidentified commercial property that we don't need, but we'll have to spend money maintaining and improving. In 15 years' time, will our successors be cursing us and saying, why on earth did they not buy more commercial property? Why did they not spend more on car parks? Our finance officer has indicated concerns in this meeting that commercial rents and car park income may not bounce back post-COVID. Or will our successors be grateful that we had the foresight to invest in renewable energy generation? A 20 million or a 50 million investment for which we have concrete ideas is likely to take us 2/3 of the way to our 2025 target of 110 megawatts. A sensible capital investment strategy would support our vision of where we want to be in 15 years' time and position us to benefit financially from our foresight when that time comes. Other local authorities, Labour Warrington, Tory West Berkshire, are showing more foresight than we are if we fail to adopt this sensible and financially wise amendment. I commend it to Council.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wolf, and in on time. Appreciate that. We have Councillor John Tanner, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Can I deal first of all with the point that Councillor Wolf has just made about commercial property? I think there is a misunderstanding about the kind of investment we're talking about. The City Council faces a situation that we all face, that retail is doing very badly, and so investment in retail is not a good idea, and that to some extent we need to get out of retail to get into other things. And the sort of things we need to get into are the investment in the science park in my own ward of Littlemore, where buildings are going up so that people can pursue science, can find the cause of pandemics, can produce vaccines, can do research, and that's an expanding industry for very good reasons. And it's something that we ought to have part of, and it's something that would give us a good return, as well as being investing in the kind of things that we want to be invested in 10 and 15 years' time. So that's what actually this council is talking about. But the main reason I want to speak is because of this outrageous suggestion by the Green Party that they want to put up the charges at Park and Ride from £2 to £2.50 and force or encourage drivers who come into Oxford over the next few years to come and park in areas which haven't yet got residence parking in place. All these proposals, these good ideas that they've come up with and nice sounding goodies are all predicated on on really hitting the park and ride users, as if park and ride users were somehow wicked people that needed to be punished. These are people who leave their cars. There isn't a good bus service from everywhere in Oxfordshire and beyond, who leave their cars on the edge of the city and then use public transport or bicycles or walk to their place of work in the city after the pandemic is over. This is something we want to encourage. We don't want to make life worse for these people. So I think this really shows that the Green Party is not a party primarily now of trying to get down to zero carbon, which is what really all of us want these days. It's a party which wants to hit the motorist.
Thank you very much, Councillor Tenner. I may remind you, the speakers, we probably have just under 16 minutes left. So if you all used your 3 minutes, we wouldn't get through all the speakers. So just bear that in mind. Councillor Steve Goddard, please.
Yeah, thanks, my Lord Mayor. It's despite the difficult circumstances in which we find ourselves, there's a risk that what's happening here tonight could be seen as relatively trivial, at least at this point in the grand scheme of things. After all, I would remind colleagues that actually the local government event of the year is taking place even as we speak. I believe it kicked off 6 minutes ago. The latest meeting of the Handforth Parish Council, possibly starring Jackie Weaver, nobody knows, kicks off at 7 o'clock. And my guess is that the online viewing rate for that will probably be several hundreds times the online viewing rate for us. So it puts us in our place. There's a risk also that tonight could be seen as trivial in that grand scheme of things, in view of the knowledge, which we all have, every one of us here, that opposition amendments are not going to be passed. Well, I would disagree. I don't believe that this point in the proceedings is in the least bit trivial. In this meeting, both our Green colleagues and ourselves in the Lib Dems have made clear that there are significant differences between the administration's approach and the opposition's. Now, regrettably, our Green colleagues didn't feel able quite to support our amendment. They came close to, as Craig described, they didn't quite make it over the line. But they would acknowledge that ours and theirs have a very great deal in common. Like the Greens, were deeply sceptical of the business case for investing in commercial property in current circumstances. We feel too that the city should walk the walk even more, as well as talking the talk on environmental investment. Solar farms are a sensible way of doing this. Equally, and I don't think that either Craig or Dick has had a chance to address this in detail, but I personally have a lot of time for the Green proposal to top up the Homelessness Reserve Fund. In the current crisis, as we're all too well aware, there are particular pressures on our homelessness service, and it makes a very good deal of sense to shore them up. Now, we're not convinced by everything here. We have a long-standing difference of opinion with our Green colleagues on, as Councillor Tanner has just mentioned, the matter of park and ride, for example. But the judgment that my group has reached is that there is a great deal that we can agree with in what the Greens are putting forward. And in the spirit of cross-party cooperation, which we all so believe in this council, we are intending to support this. Thanks, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Goddard. Councillor Tom Hayes, please.
Thanks very much, Lord Mayor. I wanted to start by just saying I'm surprised that Craig said he wanted to give this administration a pre-pass this year, because I'll be looking forward to seeing leaflets going through doors in East Oxford saying that they're the party of opposition. So it feels really peculiar that they want to just sacrifice that role. And what amendments they have come forward with, I have to say, are not really much opposition. Where's the ideas? Where on earth is the vision? You say that for the last 10 or so years, this council, this administration hasn't been addressing the climate emergency. I won't allow that view to stand. That is to do down the contributions of Councillor John Tanner over many years. Councillor Tanner will be seen on his day of retirement as one of the leading Labour environmentalists in local government. And I think it's unfair of you to undermine the work that he's done. So what exactly have we done over the last decade? We prepared for a zero emission zone this year, only zero emission black cabs by 2025. Support for the first 10 adopters of zero emission cabs, saving each driver 3,000. ODS servicing black cabs. 3 bus companies running fleets with Euro 6 engines, nothing in the city centre from this year. 78 buses upgraded to be ultra low emission, 37 to run the cleanest form of combustion engine, 5 to be fully electric, and that's before we even get to an all-electric bus city announced this year. A drop in harmful polluted air by an average of 29% in the last decade, helped by the 2014 low emission zone for buses that Councillor Tanner brought in, 100 charging stations on streets so we don't have the gap between the haves and the have-nots, 90 electric charging points for the exclusive use of black cabs and private hires, 2 electric light goods vehicles, 3 cargo bikes for the use of covered market traders from this year, 20 pop-up on-street charging points, a world's first, what I'm reliably told is a BBB, a big bloody battery, which will provide through Project Energy Superhub Oxford, the UK's largest EV charging hub this year, ground source heat pumps going into Blackbird, Leeds and other parts of the city to save people carbon and money. Moving ahead with the electrification of our fleet, the first electric lorry, refuse lorry coming into the city after a successful pilot in recent months, a try before you buy scheme for the black cab drivers that we were just talking about. And then if you move away from Project Energy Superhub Oxford, a £40 million investment, look at Project Leo, a £41 million investment. And that's before we even start talking about low carbon hub and how the council wears our values on our sleeves by supporting social enterprises to be sustainable. So if Councillor Simmons, you believe that this administration has not done anything to address the climate emergency in the last 10 years, and history started when we declared a climate emergency a year ago, I think you are sorely mistaken. I think I'll just close by saying, I'm really disappointed to see no ideas coming from the Greens. It just shows that Labour truly is the party of the environment and green causes. I'm really disappointed to see Councillor Simmons and Councillor Wolf abstaining in their vote on the Lib Dem amendment, thereby facilitating an attack on East Oxford Community Centre and facilitating an attack on investment in Cave Street. And I'm just really disappointed that the public are going to be looking at the Greens and thinking, we care about the environment, but they just don't have the ideas.
Thank you, Councillor Tom Hayes. Okay, I think we have literally just over 7 minutes, 3 speakers, and we have Councillor Rowley, Councillor Malik and Councillor Hollingsworth. So over to you, Mike.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to start by emphasising how remarkable it actually is that we are where we are. In the middle of the worst pandemic in a century, plans for hundreds of new council homes for local people, for retrofitting of existing homes, continued great estates improvements, increased spending to help the homeless, all going ahead. We can only do this because of retaining our council housing, because of careful financial planning, and because of good management based on a record of success. So in what Councillor Ros Smith described half an hour ago as shark-infested financial waters, I must caution Council about proposals to divert arbitrary sums of money to uncosted projects whose goals we're already working towards. We also have to remember that council houses are not just buildings, but homes. A programme of retrofitting worked out with residents can achieve great things quicker than a programme doesn't have that consent and is just worked out in the back of an envelope. I don't want to anticipate the response to the climate emergency scrutiny recommendations, but there's a lot of detailed work on this already, and there is going to be a lot more. Yes, I want to make quick progress. Yes, I'm excited by the idea of us building Passivhäuser, and I hope that we will sooner rather than later, but not at the price of leaving people behind. Please reject uncosted and unplanned interventions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rowley. We now have Councillor Sarge Malik. Over to you, please.
Yeah, I'll be very brief. I think what John said, John Tanner, I just want to add on the park and ride. I think we want to rather bring the charges down than up to encourage people to keep our city environment clean, and they do us a great favor using the park and ride. Secondly, when Councillor Dick Wolf said about quoting the officer saying they have their also reservation about the impact on the city financially and the others. Well, it's not a city's on impact, is the impact on the world, because it's an unusual time. Nobody knew a year ago the pandemic will have that kind of effect. So hopefully once things back to normal, the footfall will grow as ever our record shows. Every year in all circumstances, the footfall grows and the city prospers like around the country. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sarge Malik. We have two. I'm only taking 2 more now. That's Councillor Alex Hollingsworth, and then I've just noticed Councillor Tom Landell-Mills. So over to you, please, Alex.
Yeah, very briefly. I do hope that the Liberal Democrats will prove more reliable supportive partners than the Greens did in the last vote, because I'm sure I heard Craig say he was going to vote for it before or leaving Ros at the altar effectively and walking away, which was very unfortunate. I can't imagine what it was about the words named vote on the East Oxford Community Centre delay that put him off. What I wanted to commend in this budget amendment, even though I'm going to support it, not support it, is the recognition in it that the cost of zero carbon homes is not zero. I slightly lost track of the number of times I've been told over the last few years by Craig and by others that there is no cost to building homes to zero carbon. So I was surprised to see the proposal in the budget to spend what looks like an ongoing £750,000 in perpetuity to achieve that. I'm not quite sure what it's based on, what percentage of, and how it relates to the OCHL business plan, but nonetheless, the recognition of the principle is one that I think is important. I'm also surprised to see the Energiesprong based fixed comfort payments appear in a budget which has been vetted by officers, because certainly the advice that I've been given and the administration has been repeatedly given on this is that such payments aren't going to work in legal terms because benefits cannot be used to pay them. They would be outside those payments. So in effect, this looks to me, if they're going to be imposed, that those people on benefits would not be able to use their benefits to pay them. So essentially it will be an extra rent or tax on people who sit on benefits. So unless Craig is aware of legal advice very different to that which has been repeatedly given over and over again to other councillors, then that seems to me to be an unfortunate way of approaching things. Quite understand that it's a weakness in the legal system. I think we'd all want to go down those lines, and it's not Craig's fault or our fault that the benefit system is designed in the way that it is. But I think there's now a hand up, so I must be running out of time, so I'll stop.
Thank you very much, Councillor Alex Hollingsworth. We appreciate that. Okay, over to Councillor Ed Turn if you want to respond, and then we'll give Councillor Craig Simmons 3 minutes to sum up.
Lord Mayor, didn't you say Councillor Tom?
Oh, I did. No, you were right. Thank you for correcting me. My apologies.
Very briefly, I want to make the point that the Labour rebuttals to both the Lib Dem and the Green budgets really largely ignore the question of the substantive point of whether commercial investment is a good decision, and surely this is the real thing. And actually, the city would be, I think, better served in looking at putting their money there. And I suspect we'll find that it's actually a sensible decision to change, and we'll be finding a revision in the things fairly shortly. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to Councillor Turner.
Thanks, Tom. I mean, some good points have been raised in the debate, so I'll try and pick up perhaps a couple of points that haven't so far been discussed, although much of what was also said about the Lib Dem amendment holds here. And you know, I would just remind people of the officer comment that around the investment that Councillor Landor Mills was just touting, no projects have been separately identified for these items of capital spend, and therefore it's difficult to substantiate the financial viability of such schemes. Nigel Kennedy shows great kindness, not just today, but every day. And that is, I think, a very kind way of making a very clear point. Last year, I remember the Greens did put forward a budget amendment where they said you're cutting the money for town twinning, and it turned out what happened was there was a one-year fund to replace signage on the outskirts of the city, and then the signage was replaced, so the money wasn't needed anymore, and then we took cut. This year, the same stunt is being offered around the living wage. Lord Mayor, there was indeed a time-limited project to promote the living wage. That project has run. It was always intended to come out of the budget. And my goodness, you know, we've got hundreds of millions of pounds of capital expenditure. where we will be judging the procurement in part on the basis of the Oxford Living Wage and it being paid. We've got a tremendous programme of work, not just on promoting an inclusive economy through our own direct action, but influencing other organisations to do so. This is now absolutely at the core of what the council does, and I find it a real shame that we're being accused of cutting our efforts on living wage. This was simply a one-off project which has kicked off actually a much bigger platform of work. And the third point, if I may, Lord Mayor, is around the extra payments to OCHL in order to have even higher energy standards in new build council housing. What's not shown is where that's coming from. That will come off the HRA revenue, but of course in practice, because the HRA will have to commit funds to it, I think the most likely thing is it will come off some of the very substantial pots of money which we've got for retrofitting. And one question in my mind is whether we will get the greatest achievement in carbon reduction through moving slightly upwards from a very good to an even better standard, the new build, or whether we do better by spending more in terms of retrofitting. And I think that's something we need to look at on the basis of evidence rather than simply agree tonight.
Thank you very much, Councillor Turner. And Councillor Craig Simmons to sum up, please.
Well, thank you very much for people's comments. I'll try to be as brief as I can. I mean, Councillor Tanner sort of spoke about sort of having bad decisions in the past. I mean, we've got retail property now. Well, I mean, that's no reason to repeat a bad decision and buy lots of office property. And I don't think we'd have any problems realigning our property portfolio or indeed going for things like the Boswell's Hotel. And that's something we've supported, because those are sort of projects that are, on a case-by-case basis, there's a good business case for them, and we can go forward and maybe, put in a case for borrowing on a specific project. It's this sort of blanket advocacy of commercial property which we have a problem with. On the park and ride, you're right, we're putting up the park and ride in year 2. We're not putting it up initially to based on profiling of the car parks and rebuilding. Yes, building back better means that fewer people should be encouraged to drive and more people should be encouraged to take public transport or the great train links that we've got into the city. And if people do go into the city and you say that we're charging motorists, well, they're going to be hit by a £10 zero emission zone charge that we support as well, by the way, but that's the Labour administration's initiative. So if you talk to us about being anti-motorists, I think you could argue with a greater case that a £10 charge for zero emission zone is anti-motorist. We don't think it is, but I don't think the logic's very different. Councillor Goddard, thank you very much for your support. Don't think there's any particular there I needed to deal with. Councillor Hayes, well, there is of course vision in this budget, and I think you can't see it. I mean, you can't see to see it, and I think this has been the problem historically. I've been on the council for many years. I've heard Councillor Tanner say some amazing things, but also speak out against the Labour administration on occasions. I remember many occasions where it's done. This is looking forward. What happens when people are more remote working, more online shopping, when energy prices are higher, when people are using their car less? This is why we need to realign the way we finance council services. We need to think not about commercial property, because the commercial property market is in inevitable decline because more people are going to be remote working, flexible workspaces. Online shopping is an increasing trend, and is something like 40%, I think, of look at all the failing high street fashion brands that are happening now, all being bought by the ASOSs of this world and going online, not buying their shops. This is what the vision is in this budget, is how do we transform and invest in the right things going to see a sustainable income and revenue for this council going forward, so we can continue to fund the council services. I support the Oxford model, but we need to get bigger. We need to take into account things and how they're going to change. Councillor Turner, Nigel Kennedy also said in his review that a lot of what we did was also mitigated by the fact there's an extra 1.9 million in the budget as a cushion, and that's the flip side of what he said. The living wage stuff, yes, we need to continue the campaign, the project that's already there. And just briefly,
10 seconds, keep it brief.
Councillor Hollingsworth, yes, we put £7,750 per property because that's what OCHL said it was. Nigel Kennedy wouldn't have allowed us to get away with saying it was cost neutral.
Councillor Simmons, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Sorry to stop you in your tracks. Okay. Oh, sorry. Councillor Sian Taylor, you've got your hand up. Sorry, what was that?
Yeah, Lord Mayor, could I call for a named vote for this amendment, please?
Yes, you can. And can I just ask people to put their hands down? Oh, sorry, we need the 10 hands. Sorry, yes, sorry, carry on. Okay, Jennifer, as you can see, we've got more than the 10 hands needed to call for a named vote, okay?
Okay, so I see 10 in favour of taking a named vote for the green amendments. So we'll need to do this the same way. And I'll, bear with me just 2 seconds.
Take as much time as you want.
Find the sheet with your names in order. Once again, I'll call your name, and if you can state for the record whether you're voting for, against, or abstaining on the green amendments. And I'll start with Councillor Altaf Khan. For. Councillor Arshad.
Against.
Councillor Azad.
Against.
Councillor Aziz.
Against.
Councillor Bailey Summers.
Against.
Councillor Brown.
Sorry, couldn't unmute. Against.
Councillor Chapman.
Against.
Councillor Clarkson.
Against.
Councillor Cook.
Against.
Councillor Corres.
Against.
Councillor Curran.
Against.
Councillor Fry.
Against.
Councillor Gant.
For.
Councillor Garden.
For.
Councillor Goddard.
For.
Councillor Gotch.
For.
Councillor Tom Hayes.
Against.
Councillor Henwood.
For.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Against.
Councillor Howlett.
Against.
Councillor Humberstone.
Against.
Councillor Kennedy.
Against.
Councillor Landell Mills.
For.
Councillor Lloyd Shigbegson.
Against.
Councillor Ligo.
Against.
Councillor McManus.
Against.
Councillor Malik.
Against.
Councillor Munkongi.
Against.
Councillor Pressel.
Against.
Councillor Rowley.
Against.
Councillor Sim.
Against.
Councillor Simmons.
For.
Councillor Linda Smith.
Against.
Councillor Ross Smith.
For.
Councillor Tanner.
Against.
Councillor Tarver.
Against.
Councillor Taylor.
Against.
Councillor Tidwell.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Turner.
Against.
Councillor Upton.
Against.
Councillor Wade.
For.
And Councillor Wolfe.
For.
Right, that's everyone.
Okay, in your own time, again, numbers for for, against,
I'll
and
make that
abstain.
11. Sorry, Lord Mayor, I'll make that 11 for.
Yes.
And 32 against. Have I missed anyone?
Jennifer, can I just raise a point?
Yep.
It's about the previous vote. You said only 6 voted for the Lib Dem amendment. In
yes,
fact,
Councillor, I apologise. It was actually 8.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
That'll teach me to subtract from the wrong number.
No, that's absolutely fine. Thank you.
So that's 40, 43. Okay, I think that's everyone. So that's lost.
Yes, it is. Sorry to complicate things. So we had 42 people voting on the last Lib Dem amendment, and we have 43 people voting for the Green amendment now. Can we just double check those, please?
You're correct. It's 31 against.
31 against on this Green amendment.
Yep.
Yes.
11
okay.
for and
Yep.
3.
Okay.
3 are not here. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that falls. Right, we are now going to take a well-deserved break, and we'll be breaking for 30 minutes, and I expect you all back just a couple of minutes before 7 o'clock, please, where we'll then debate the individual amendments.
You mean 8 o'clock, Mayor? Yeah, it's already 7:30.
Oh, sorry. Yes, so it is. So it is. Yes. My apologies. Thank you for reminding me, Councillor Malik. Yes, if we can be back literally about 2 minutes for 8 o'clock. It's a long day. Okay, I need to